Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here to speak with you on this platform. Actually, a first podcast that I've spoken on, hopefully to be of many. But thank you for your platform and for working diligently toward, the uptick of our profession. So I was born in Houston, Texas. Both my mother and father lived in the Midwest. My father's from Tulsa, my mother's from Kansas City. And so they met in Kansas City because my father moved to Kansas City, when he was in school. And basically just, typical Midwestern family. My father ended up being drafted playing football for the Houston Oilers. So we moved to Houston before I was actually born, and that's how I was born in Houston. But he played only for a couple of years and then was traded to Buffalo Bills in New York. And my mother was like, nah, we're not going up there, not from Houston. So we stayed back. So I didn't make that trek, and he didn't like it either, obviously. So he ended up stopping playing with the NFL, and we ended up moving back home in Kansas City. So I was raised here. This is home. I lived in Dallas for 20 years, or a little bit over 22 years actually, and back and forth between chiropractic college there. But I basically went back to Dallas and lived after graduation for a while, and then ended up having to come home 5 years ago. So I'm here in the Kansas City area. Of course, with a father that plays in the NFL, right? You grew up in a house full of athletes, nonetheless. My brother and I were athletic. We both, competed in college. I did earn a full scholarship for track and field at the University of Kansas, the Big 8 conference. I know that's like history at this point, so I'm aging myself. But I ran track there and ended up injured and could not really complete my 4 years of running track and field at a D1 collegiate level. No one really could tell me what was wrong. Of course, now I know I had plantar fasciitis and, pretty much just plagued with low back pain from a number of things. But it was always suggested surgery or like stop running. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm going to stop running. So at that point, I just got my degree in exercise science, sports med, or sport and health studies, which was back then considered today to be athletic training. And got that degree, worked with a couple of sports teams, and, met a friend of mine who worked with me at the bank. Going through undergrad, I worked at a bank part-time, and went over to her house, and her husband was a Tri-9 at Parker at the time. And so, he adjusted me, and I was having allergy issues at that time. Had never heard of chiropractic, believe it or not. And so he adjusted me, and the rest was history. He was like, I think you'd probably be really good at this. And so I ended up, very interested in matriculating there at Parker, but knew I wanted to come back to the Midwest to go to school. So I ended up at Logan. Which was home, but not home. It's 3 hours from where my family lives here in Kansas City, there in Chesterfield, Missouri. And so, the journey just begun there. I did a few things sports related there, worked with the Ferguson Florissant School District at McClure North High School as their athletic trainer, is where I started out being their athletic trainer, and then turned into their track coach, and then turned into their, district chiropractor, if you will.